Story 1. The Shadow in the Dining Area. Trevor had always hated cooking after a late shift. By the time he dragged himself home from the factory, his clothes smelled like oil and metal, his head buzzed from the clanging of machines, and his stomach was hollow and restless. On nights like this, the last thing he wanted was to fry eggs or boil pasta in silence. What he craved was something fast, greasy, and comforting, the kind of food you only eat when exhaustion trumps common sense. That's how he found himself pulling into the parking lot of the 24-hour KFC just past 3 in the morning. The lot was almost empty, save for the flickering orange lamplight spilling shadows across the cracked pavement. His headlights swept over abandoned carts and a single overturned styrofoam cup tumbling in the wind. Trevor parked near the entrance, his windshield fogging from the cold rain that had started misting down. He hesitated a moment, staring at the glowing red and white bucket logo above the doors. There was something about the place at that hour, the silence, the stillness, that felt wrong. Fast food restaurants were meant to be noisy, buzzing with chatter, the smell of fries clinging to every corner. At 3 a.m., it looked more like a stage after the curtain had fallen, a place pretending to be alive when no one was watching. Still, hunger gnawed at him. He shoved open the door and stepped inside. The first thing that hit him was the hum. The fluorescent lights above buzzed with a steady, almost insect-like vibration. The air smelled faintly of grease and something stale, like food that had been fried too many times in the same oil. The dining area was deserted. Every booth sat empty, their red cushions cracked and peeling. The soda machine gurgled faintly, spitting occasional drops of syrup into the tray. At the counter, a cashier stood waiting. Trevor blinked. He hadn't seen him at first. The guy was thin, his uniform slightly too big, the visor casting his eyes in shadow. He didn't greet Trevor, didn't even offer the robotic, "Welcome to KFC." He just stared, then tapped at the register like he'd been expecting him. Number 3 combo," Trevor muttered. His voice sounded too loud in the empty space. The cashier punched it in without a word. Trevor shuffled toward a booth by the window and sank down, pulling out his phone to distract himself. He scrolled mindlessly, but the Wi-Fi was dead and the signal was weak. The silence pressed in. Somewhere in the back, a fryer hissed and popped, but no one spoke. That's when he noticed it. In the reflection of the window, something moved. Trevor froze, staring at the faint double image cast by the glass. Behind him, across the dining area, a figure walked past the booths. Tall, thin, wearing something dark. His breath caught as he spun around. Nothing. The booths stretched out in perfect emptiness, the ketchup dispensers lined like sentinels, the napkin holders untouched. He rubbed his eyes. Maybe it was his imagination. He'd been awake since 6 a.m. the previous day. His brain was bound to play tricks. But a minute later, he saw it again. This time, the shadow stood still. At the far end of the dining area, half hidden in the reflection, a tall silhouette loomed between two booths. No face, no details, just blackness. Trevor's skin prickled. He turned again. Empty. He tried to laugh at himself, muttering, "You're just tired." Sleep deprived. He picked up his phone again, scrolling faster, desperate for distraction. But the feeling wouldn't leave. His chest felt tight, his skin crawling as though eyes pressed into him from all sides. He told himself not to look again, not to check the reflection, because if he saw it one more time, he wouldn't be able to explain it away. But of course, he looked. This time, the shadow was closer. One booth away, looming just behind his left shoulder. Trevor shot to his feet, his chair screeching across the tiles. His breath came in short gasps as he whipped around. Nothing. Just the yawning emptiness of the dining area, the flickering buzz of a light overhead. His hands shook as he shoved his phone into his pocket. The cashier's voice broke the silence. "Your order." Trevor turned. The man stood behind the counter again, holding out a tray with his food. No smile. No acknowledgement of Trevor's panic. Just those shadowed eyes under the visor. Trevor took the tray with trembling hands and forced himself to sit. He tried to eat, but each bite stuck in his throat. He kept glancing at the window, praying not to see it again. He lasted 3 minutes. When he finally gave in and looked, the shadow was right there, inches behind him. But this time, he didn't turn. Instead, with shaking hands, he lifted his phone and angled the camera toward the reflection. He tapped record, trying not to breathe too loud. He let it roll for 10 seconds, then stopped and opened the video. His heart stuttered as the screen lit up. There it was. The shadow. Not just standing, crouched low, as though about to pounce. Its faceless head tilted unnaturally toward him. Its long fingers stretched toward the booth where he sat. Trevor dropped the phone. The tray clattered as he shoved himself out of the booth. He didn't even grab his food. He bolted for the door, his shoes squeaking against the tile. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss, spilling cold night air onto his sweat-slicked skin. He sprinted across the parking lot, fumbling for his keys, glancing back just once. The doors opened again. The cashier was gone. Instead, the shadow stepped through. It moved slowly, deliberately, its form still faceless but solid now, its body darker than the night itself. It crossed the threshold and began walking straight toward him. Trevor's keys slipped from his hands. He scrambled, grabbed them, yanked open his car door, and threw himself inside. The engine roared to life, headlights flaring. The figure stopped at the edge of the lamplight, watching. Trevor didn't wait. He slammed the gear into reverse and tore out of the lot, tires screeching on wet pavement. His chest heaved, his eyes wide and unblinking, afraid that if he blinked, he'd see it in the rearview mirror. He didn't stop driving until he was home, locked inside, every light blazing. Later, unable to sleep, he pulled up his phone. His hands trembled as he opened the video again. The screen lit with static. Then, frame by frame, he saw it. Not just the shadow, not just the faceless crouching thing, but its head turning toward the camera, toward him, its mouth opening into something too wide, too dark, too hungry. The video cut off there. Trevor deleted it instantly, but the image stayed burned into his brain. The next day, he tried to laugh it off, tried to convince himself it was exhaustion, a hallucination, anything. But when he looked up the hours for that KFC, just to prove to himself it was real, he froze. The website said the store closed at midnight. Had for years. There hadn't been a 24-hour KFC in town since 2017. Story 2. The employee who stayed late. Maria always hated the closing shift. When she first started at the KFC on the edge of town, she told herself the late hours weren't a big deal. The pay was steady, and with her manager leaving her in charge after midnight, it felt like proof that she could be trusted. But after 3 months of working until nearly 3 a.m., she realized the silence of the place was worse than any dinner rush. It was one thing to deal with customers shouting for extra biscuits or teenagers sneaking into the bathroom for too long. It was another thing entirely to be alone in a building designed for noise, where every corner echoed, every fryer hiss seemed too loud, every hum of the refrigerator sounded like it was breathing. By 2:45 a.m. that night, Maria was dragging. Her back ached, her hands reeked of bleach and grease, and her eyes burned from exhaustion. The last customer had left 20 minutes earlier, and her manager, Frank, had clocked out long before then, muttering something about an early morning meeting. That left Maria to clean, restock, and lock up. As usual, she sighed as she scrubbed the red plastic trays, stacking them neatly by the soda fountain. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making her shadow stretch and flicker against the tile floor. Outside, the parking lot was empty, the lamplight spilling over cracked asphalt and weeds. She was wiping down a booth when she heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Dragging. Maria froze, the rag in her hand going limp. They were coming from the kitchen. Her first thought was that Frank had come back. Maybe he'd forgotten paperwork or left his keys. But Frank never moved that slowly. He was a heavy-set guy, sure, but his footsteps were brisk, impatient. These steps were deliberate. Weighted. As if whoever it was wanted her to hear. Her second thought was worse. Someone had broken in. Her pulse quickened as she glanced at the front doors. Still locked. The windows were intact. No cars outside. She swallowed hard. "Hello," she called, her voice cracking in the silence. The footsteps stopped. Her ears rang with the sudden stillness. Clutching the rag like a pathetic weapon, she stepped cautiously toward the swinging kitchen doors. They creaked faintly, swaying as if someone had just gone through. "Frank?" She tried again, softer this time. No answer. She pushed the door open an inch and peeked inside. The kitchen looked the same as always at closing. Counters wiped, fryers off, mop leaning against the wall. But her eyes caught movement at the far end. The walk-in cooler. The door was open just enough for light to spill through, flickering like a dying bulb. And in that light, a figure stood. Maria's breath hitched. It wasn't Frank. The shape was wrong. Taller, thinner. The shoulders hunched at an odd angle, like bones straining beneath skin. The cooler door creaked, then shut on its own. Maria stumbled back, clutching her phone. Her hands shook so hard she nearly dropped it as she fumbled for the keypad, ready to dial 911. But something stopped her. The silence. She strained her ears. The kitchen was dead quiet. No hum from the cooler. No footsteps. No breathing. Against every instinct screaming in her head, Maria forced herself to push open the cooler door. Her breath fogged in the sudden cold. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh white shadows across the shelves. But the room was empty. The shelves were bare, wiped down hours ago. The floor was spotless. Not even footprints in the thin layer of condensation. Her pulse hammered. She backed out quickly, letting the heavy door swing shut. Her eyes darted to the prep counters, and that's when she saw it. A bucket of fried chicken, sitting neatly on the stainless steel surface. Steam curled lazily into the air, carrying the unmistakable scent of fresh grease and seasoning. Maria's stomach twisted. She hadn't fried a single piece since before closing. The fryers were off. The oil had been drained. Her hand trembled as she reached toward it, then snatched back. The chicken looked real. Too real. Golden brown, glistening, perfectly cooked. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint drip of water from the mop bucket. And then, chewing. Wet. Sloppy. Hungry chewing. It came from the dining area. Maria's throat closed. She couldn't bring herself to turn around, couldn't bring herself to see what was waiting beyond those swinging doors. Her entire body screamed at her to run. She did. She bolted for the front, her shoes squeaking against the tile. She didn't even think about grabbing her bag from the back. She shoved the door open, spilling out into the night. The air was freezing, sharp in her lungs as she sprinted to her car. She fumbled with the keys, flung herself inside, and locked the doors. Her hands shook on the wheel as she stared at the glowing red KFC sign, the windows blazing with light. Inside, something was moving. She couldn't see it clearly, just shadows flickering across the booths. But she could still hear it, even through the glass. That chewing. She drove away and didn't look back. The next morning, Maria sat at her kitchen table, staring at her untouched coffee. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the figure in the cooler, the steaming bucket, the shadows moving in the dining room. Her phone buzzed. It was Frank. "Maria, what the hell happened last night?" he barked the second she answered. "Doors were wide open when I got here. Lights blazing. Anyone could have walked in." I couldn't," Maria stammered. "There was someone else there. I swear." "I saw you saw what?" Frank cut in, his voice sharp. She faltered. What could she even say? A shadow? A phantom bucket of chicken? The sound of chewing when the store was empty? Frank sighed heavily. "Maria, you were the only one on the schedule. You always close alone after midnight. There's nobody else here." Her blood ran cold. "But," she whispered. "No buts," Frank snapped. "This can't happen again. You either close properly or you don't work here." He hung up. Maria sat frozen, the silence of her apartment pressing in. For a long moment, she told herself it had been stress, exhaustion, her mind playing tricks. That was all. Until she noticed the smell. She looked down. On her kitchen table sat a red and white bucket of fried chicken. Still steaming. Story 3, the drive-thru customer. The highway at night was endless. Derek's eyes burned from the strain of staring at the yellow lines for hours. He'd been driving since dusk, his energy drinks long gone, and his music barely keeping him awake. The dashboard clock glowed 3:07 a.m. in dim green digits. The world outside the windshield was nothing but blackness broken by the occasional flash of reflector posts and the hiss of his tires on asphalt. He needed something, anything, to keep him awake. When he saw it, the sight jolted him. Up ahead, rising like a beacon from the empty stretch of highway, was the glowing red and white bucket sign of a KFC. Its light cut through the rain-streaked windshield, almost too bright in the emptiness. "Thank God," Derek muttered, tightening his grip on the wheel. His stomach growled at the thought of greasy food, and more importantly, the salt and fat would help him push through the exhaustion. The exit ramp curved sharply, leading him onto a deserted road. The KFC sat just off the interstate, its parking lot dark except for a single flickering lamppost. The restaurant itself looked tired. Paint peeling, the red stripes on the awning faded to pink, the drive-thru sign leaning slightly to one side, as if it had been forgotten. Still, the glowing sign promised food. He pulled into the drive-thru lane. The speaker crackled to life instantly, startling him. "Welcome to KFC," a deep voice intoned. "What can I get you?" Derek blinked. He hadn't even pulled up all the way. The voice was slow, deliberate, almost too steady, like each word was being measured out carefully. Yeah," he said, leaning closer to the speaker. "Can I get a two-piece combo? Extra crispy? With fries and a Coke?" There was a pause. The static hissed. "Then, that will do." The phrasing was strange, but Derek shrugged it off. He was too tired to care. The voice gave him a total. He drove forward to the first window. It was dark. No lights on inside, no movement behind the glass. But taped to the window was a handwritten sign, "Pay here." He rolled it down, set a $10 bill on the sill. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the bill was yanked out of sight. He jerked back in surprise, but saw no one. "Okay," he muttered under his breath, pulling ahead to the second window. This one was darker still. The inside looked abandoned, counters bare, no fryers hissing, no soda machine bubbling. Just shadows stretching into the empty restaurant. He waited. 1 minute. 2. The rain began again, soft against his windshield, the wipers smearing it into streaks. He tapped the steering wheel nervously, craning his neck to see if anyone was coming. Then, with a creak that made his skin crawl, the drive-thru window slid open. Nobody was there. Instead, a paper bag slid across the counter, nudged forward by something unseen. It stopped just at the edge, waiting for him. Derek stared, heart thudding. Every instinct told him not to take it. But the silence was unbearable, and something in him, the need to finish the exchange, to not break the ritual of the drive-thru, forced his hand. He grabbed the bag. It was cold. Not just a little chilled, ice cold, as if it had been sitting in a freezer. Grease stained the bottom, but the bag sagged strangely, heavier than it should have been. Uneasy, Derek set it on the passenger seat. He told himself he'd just drive until the next gas station and eat it there, with lights and people around. But the smell hit him. It wasn't chicken. It was sour, metallic. His stomach twisted. Against his better judgment, he opened the bag. Inside were bones. Not fresh, golden pieces of fried chicken, but bare, gnawed bones. Dozens of them, piled together, stained dark with something thicker than grease. The smell of rot hit him full force, making bile rise in his throat. He gagged, nearly tossing the bag out the window. At the bottom was a crumpled receipt. Hands shaking, he pulled it free. Instead of listing his order, it bore a single line of text, scrawled in faint, faded ink. 3 a.m. We feed too. The paper was damp, edges smeared, as if it had been printed years ago. Derek dropped the bag, heart pounding. He slammed the car into drive and tore out of the lot, tires screeching on wet asphalt. Back on the highway, he couldn't stop shaking. His headlights carved tunnels of light through the blackness, but every mile marker looked the same, every exit sign unreadable in the rain. He tried to calm himself, telling himself it was a prank, some late-night employee messing with him. Or maybe he was just too tired, hallucinating. But the bag was still on the passenger seat. He could hear the faint clatter of bones shifting with every curve of the road. Finally, he pulled over at a gas station 30 miles away. Bright fluorescent lights flooded the pumps, the comfort of civilization easing some of the fear. He grabbed the bag with 2 fingers, holding it away from his body, and flung it into the dumpster by the pumps. It landed with a sickening clatter. He didn't look back. Inside the station, he bought coffee, splashed his face with cold water, and forced himself to believe it was over. Just some weird roadside nightmare he could laugh about later. But when he slid back behind the wheel, his stomach dropped. The bag was back, sitting neatly on the passenger seat. Steam curled from the top, fogging the windshield. His hands shook as he picked it up, half expecting the bones again. But this time, it was different. The bag was filled with chicken, hot, fresh, golden fried chicken, perfectly cooked. The smell was mouth-watering. And beneath the pieces, another receipt. This one was fresh, being sharp. It read, "Next time, stay and eat with us." Derek's hands went numb. He dropped the bag, floored the gas pedal, and sped into the night, not daring to look back. He didn't tell anyone about it for weeks. Not until he finally broke down to a friend, recounting every detail. His friend frowned. "Wait, where did you say this was?" "Off I-43. Exit 212. Right by the old truck stop." The friend shook his head. "Derek, there hasn't been a KFC there in years. Burned down in an electrical fire. Place went up fast. I remember the news saying it happened around 3 a.m. Place has been boarded up ever since." Derek felt the blood drain from his face. He never drove that stretch of highway again. But sometimes, late at night, when he passes other exits, he swears he still sees the faint glow of a red and white bucket, calling him back.